Good evening, everyone. On behalf of the Ladies Study Group, I am so happy to welcome you all today. As we continue to deal with the corona crisis, the increasing number of positive cases every single day, the disheartening delays on the vaccine availability, and the uncertain behavior of the very virus itself, it is so important for all of us to know how we can remain hopeful and resilient. As Charles Darwin, the father of evolution, has said, it is not the strongest of the species that survives, nor is it the most intelligent. It is the one that is the most adaptable to change. And that is what you and me need to be today. And yes, it's easy to say and not so easy to do, because the future does look uncertain, and therefore we must prepare ourselves for it one day at a time. And so, to help and guide us on the best way forward, I'm so honored to invite to our screen today our guest, Srimati Jaya Raoji.
Thank you, Dia.
Thank you so much for joining us, Jayaji.
My pleasure.
Jaya Raoji is one of the most powerful speakers on Vedanta, which is the oldest management school in the world. Backed by her experience in corporate life and 40 years of research on Vedanta, she motivates her audience to live successful and happy lives. Clarity, wit, and zeal are the hallmark of her presentations. Her seminars for corporate executives focus on the development of the human being into a fulfilled and dynamic individual. Jaya Raoji has gained international recognition and spoken at prestigious forums such as the World Economic Forum in Davos, World Bank, Princeton University, Washington University, and others. She has been invited by organizations like Apple, Google, Intel, KPMG, and many others, and spoken at their centers in California, New York, London, and many other cities worldwide. Personally, I had the privilege of meeting and spending time with Jayaji in Kolkata just before the lockdown was announced. In fact, I think she was perhaps on one of the last few flights out of Kolkata before the lockdown in March this year. And the magic of her simplicity, her calmness, and her peace have stayed with me, as have her twinkling eyes, her gentle smile, and her refreshing sense of humor. And I'm so happy that today we can jointly share this experience of being with her together. So over to you, Jayaji.
Thank you, Dia. The subject for this evening is coping with uncertainty. This uncertainty reminds me of Charles Dickens' The Tale of Two Cities, which begins like this. It was the best of times, it was the worst of times. It was the age of wisdom, it was the age of foolishness. It was the spring of hope, and it was the winter of despair. We had everything before us, we had nothing before us. We were all going direct to heaven, and we were all going direct the other way. So, why I read this out is because the situation being the same, it depends on how you view it, what attitude you have in life that makes all the difference. When things go as planned, you are comfortable. When life throws a curveball, you get anxious, stressed, worried. COVID virus has pulled the carpet from under our feet. Yet, you seek security outside. Nature is telling us to course correct, to think, reflect, and perhaps change the course of our life. If you look around, you find uncertainty everywhere. Our physical and mental health is uncertain. No one knows which way the economy will go, or your personal, individual, financial situation. Relationships are becoming strained. This situation is draining you emotionally, and somehow you get trapped in a downward spiral of thinking of the worst case scenario. But different people see things differently. There are people who enjoy risks and enjoy the unpredictability of the situation. There are others who find the randomness deeply distressing. But all of us have a limit to which we can tolerate external challenges, and then we break down. So, this limit is set by your spiritual level. Our spiritual level is inversely proportional to your dependence on the world. In other words, if you are at a low level of spiritual development, you are dependent on the world to a very large extent. You want things in the world to be just right, and only then you can be comfortable. But a person who is at a high level of spiritual development needs very little from the world and has this inner strength and resilience to bear with life's difficulties. There are three states of mind. One is restless. It's like a cone trying to rest on its apex. It will always fall over unless it is supported all the time. Some of us are like this. We want everything around us just right, and only then we can be comfortable. That's a highly unpredictable state to be in. It's not a nice state to be in because you are dependent on external factors to a great extent. Slightly better than this is like a cone resting on its side. A cone resting on its side is stable by itself, but you nudge it slightly and it goes on oscillating and takes a long time before it comes to rest. By the time it comes to rest, something else happens and off the cone goes again. Some people are like this. By themselves, they are fine, but someone makes a slight remark, someone sends a message that is not quite right, and it sparks off mental agitation in the person for a long period of time. And by the time it settles down, there is some other trigger that sets off agitation. The best state to be in is like a cone resting on its base. Even if you tilt it, it quickly comes back to base. This is the state that only a human being can reach. Only a human being can be completely and totally independent of the world. But how many of us even know this? And how many of us strive for this? So this is a state where nothing in the world can upset you. Nothing in the world can shake you. Yes, you may bend over, but you quickly bounce back. As Oliver Goldsmith said, for him in vain the envious seasons roll, who bears eternal summer in his soul. So this is what we're going to talk about in the next few minutes. How to bear this eternal summer in your soul, irrespective of what happens around you. Now, the first thing that we need to understand is that the world is full of challenges. The nature of the world is that it will be full of challenges. Take a look at just in the last 100 years. We think that this is a terrible catastrophe that has hit us, but the world has seen the Spanish flu, 2 world wars, almost one after the other. And in between that, we had the plague epidemic, the smallpox epidemic, polio, all kinds of challenges and diseases have hit us. And yet, humankind has pulled through. And this is what we need to understand. Just as the ocean anywhere in the world has waves, the world at any period in time, in history or in the future or in the present, will be full of challenges. The only difference is, just as in the ocean, a person who has learned how to sport with the waves enjoys the waves. If a small wave comes, he rides over it. If a big wave comes, he ducks under it. But never is he thrown off balance. Similarly, a person who has learned the art of self-management and has evolved spiritually will know exactly how to deal with the challenges of the world. If a small challenge comes, he rides over it. A large challenge comes, ducks under it. But never is he toppled by any challenge. Life is a game. And just as in any other game, you win some, you lose some. When you lose, when you fall, you must learn the art of falling but bouncing back like a ball to a height higher than where you started from. Don't fall like a lead plate, never to rise again. And yes, COVID is a game changer, but everything is not bleak and miserable. Uncertainty is a natural and unavoidable situation. It's part and parcel of life. Now let's take a look at what makes for life. There are two components in life. There is you, the subject, and the world, the object. When you come in contact with the world, an experience is born, and a series of experiences is your life. Now let's take a look at the components of the experience, you and the world. Both are in a constant flux of change. The world is a mix of pairs of opposites. Joy, sorrow, profit, loss, birth, death, honor, dishonor. These are part and parcel of life. They're constantly changing. So the world is in a constant flux of change, and this change is unpredictable. In December 2019, who in the world would have thought that 2020 would be a write-off? In a way. Let's take a look at us, you, the individual. We consist of the body. Our cells are constantly changing. Science tells us that in a matter of a few years, you are really not the same person again. Every single cell in your body has changed. The mind is changing. The day you got married, how did you view your spouse? Today, how do you view the spouse? There's a change, right? Intellect changes. I know people who were meat eaters at every meal they wanted meat, who have now completely changed and become vegan. So, body changes, mind changes, intellect changes, world changes. But the important part here is that you have no control over the world. You have no control over any part of the world. And the last thing on earth that you have any control over is your spouse. So don't even try changing your spouse. But over yourself, you have complete and total control. So what you don't have control over, don't even think about it. What you have control over, focus there. Build your inner reserves, build strength, build your psychological immunity, and you will be resistant to not just the COVID virus or other diseases, but you'll be resistant to internal breakdowns. The world is an unreliable entity. At any point in time, you depend on the world, you get crushed by it. You value it, you get heartbroken. Ride on it, you get affected. The same world and the same you Just stop depending on it. It becomes a pleasure to deal with the world. Understand the right value. Sri Ramakrishna said, the world and all that it has to offer, its inherent value is zero. Understand that and deal with the world. Enjoy the world, interact with it, possess it, acquire it, enjoy it. But never give it the hype that you now give. Be objective with reference to the world, and you will have the most wonderful experience dealing with the world. Pain in life is a given. There is no one in the world who has not experienced pain. But suffering is your choice. To what extent you allow that pain to get to you is under your control. So, choose not to suffer. Now, what happens is, when pain strikes us, it's not a pleasant experience. You go through it, it's fine. But we compound the pain. How do we compound it? We anticipate it and suffer. There are so many people now who imagine that if they get COVID, what will happen to them? And perhaps they will never get it. So don't meet misfortune halfway. Be prepared for it, take proper precautions, do what you can, and leave the rest. But don't suffer in anticipation. So we suffer in anticipation. When the problem strikes us, of course we suffer. And we suffer in retrospect. After it's all over, we post photographs on Instagram and Facebook and social media. We relive that painful experience, and altogether it becomes unbearable. So remember, you have a choice. You have a choice to be victim or victor. You have a choice to succumb to the challenge or to stand up to it. You can go under or rise above it. And that is what makes the difference. In the Italian movie called Life is Beautiful, there was a Jewish gentleman who was thrown into a concentration camp along with his 4-year-old son. And he decides right from the word go that he's going to protect his son from the unpleasantness of the concentration camp. And he turns the entire thing into a game and tells the child that every time you bear with an unpleasant experience happily, you will earn points. And if you earn 1,000 points, you get the toy tank that he wanted. It was his 4th birthday when they were taken and thrown into the concentration camp. And those of you who've seen the movie will know that with such cheer, energy, dynamism, and optimism, this man faced the situation and made sure that his son was untouched by the negatives of the concentration camp. He made all the prisoners laugh. He made them enjoy. Even the guards joined in the merrymaking. And after I saw that movie, I came home and I told myself, if that guy could not be complaining and sorrowful in a concentration camp, I have no reason to complain. So this is the message from Vedanta. One of the most important things we need to do is to build a circle of family and friends. Feel one with them. Invest in relationships, because when you're alone, it's tough to meet with even an ordinary challenge. But when you're together, the whole experience becomes effortless. So build teams. When things are okay, it gives you pleasure to dig your heels in and say, I want it my way. We all say that. It's my way or the highway. And in the end, it's you who are going to go on the highway. because you, it's not possible to go through life's challenges alone. It's so nice to have people around you. You know, there's a lady in Mumbai who lives in a joint family and who is always complaining, oh, I want a nuclear family, I want to live by myself. This time when the COVID virus struck, and some of her relatives in the United States who were just a couple, husband and wife living together, and the depression that they went through. When she came to know of it, she said, oh, we're so lucky that we are living in a family with so many members. That we don't even know, we don't feel that loneliness. You know? So it's important. Now, what's your vision in life? You have a choice of looking at the world in a bleak and dreary way, or in the same world, you can see a wondrous, magnificent view. Have you looked out of your window and seen the blue sky? Now, with less pollution, less people driving, you look up at any time, you see a blue sky. I don't know about Kolkata, but Mumbai, definitely there's a change, even now. You can have a petty view of life. And most of us are like that. You're looking at little things, trivial, insignificant, petty, small-minded, and therefore you have conflict at every stage. Or do you have a lofty vision? Take a look at Japan. After the Second World War, it was absolutely devastated. But they literally rose from the ashes and built a strong economy. Even now, Japan is an economy to reckon with. They have not allowed the COVID virus to affect them health-wise, economy-wise, financially, because they are a disciplined lot, they are a focused lot, they do things for the nation. Every Japanese thinks Japan first. That is the lofty vision they have. What will happen if every Indian thought of India first? We're all looking at our own little small problems, and no one is looking at the larger picture. So your view can be mundane, then you'll be bored stiff, or you could be inspired. You can have a worldly view, or you can look at the same thing from a divine perspective. The most important thing is rise above thought of self, because thought of self is the devil. We are sitting on a gold mine of knowledge, Vedantic knowledge. If you look back in the past, the Greeks took this Vedantic knowledge from us, the Europeans took it from the Greeks, and then the Americans took it. And now you have people like Will Smith swearing by the Bhagavad Gita. Julia Roberts declares that she's a practicing Hindu. Tulsi Gabbard talks about the Bhagavad Gita, and we Indians are listening to her. So once you know what strengths you have, you can focus on this internal wealth. Focus on what you can change. You have no control over which way the virus is going, when things will normalize, whether things will normalize at all. You don't know in which direction the economy will go, or whether your business will go up or down. But you're not entirely powerless. You can shift from ineffective worrying and losing sleep over it to a problem-solving mindset. Deal with your emotions. Call the bluff of your own mind. It is the mind that is the devil in you. And in all this, your attitude is what makes the difference. There's a beautiful movie called Yes, Virginia, There is Santa Claus. It's about a little 8-year-old girl, daughter of Irish immigrants in New York in the 1930s when America was going through a depression. And the father was without a job, he was a journalist. This little girl around Christmas time goes to the father, because he's the intellectual, and asks him, is there Santa Claus? Is Santa Claus for real? So very absent-mindedly, because he's looking at the papers to look for a job, the father says, if the sun says so, then there is Santa Claus. The sun is the newspaper. So this little girl sends a letter to the editor of the Sun asking, is there Santa Claus? And she writes her name, Virginia. Her name is Virginia, the 8-year-old. The letter goes to the desk of the editor. And just at that time, he's trying his best to help a journalist who is going through problems. He's just lost his wife, he's drinking too much. And he reads the letter, he calls that journalist, he throws the paper at him and says, I have a very important job for you. I want you to answer this question in the newspaper. So the journalist looks at the paper and says, have you gone mad? What's wrong with you? The editor says, no, I'm serious. This man who is depressed, who's sorrowful that he's lost his wife, who's been drinking hard, now picks up that letter and goes out in the cold and the snow and sees things differently. Where he saw a bleak and dreary world, now he saw miracles. He saw goodness. He saw people giving. He saw people enjoying. He saw happiness. And he writes a letter to Virginia on the front page of the newspaper saying, yes, Virginia, there is Santa Claus. And that is the movie. So friends, never lose hope. Never go out of focus on the good things of life. There is goodness everywhere. Challenge the need for security. For every unpleasant surprise, there is something good happening. And you must live on faith. Every time you cross the road, you have faith that you will not be run over, right? Every time you sit in the car and drive, you have faith that you will come back home alive. Every time you eat out, you don't suspect that maybe I'll get food poisoning and die. Similarly, have faith. Uncertain does not mean bad necessarily. In these uncertain times, there are good things that are happening. So do what you can and let go. But it's important to have a plan. Have a plan and work out what you're going to do, how you're going to use your time effectively, gainfully. Many people have started focusing on their talent. Some people had talent for embroidery, some people had talent for cooking, others had talent for other things. Don't look at just making money, but just doing it for the love of it. That is what is important. And focus on the present. Enjoy the present. This afternoon when I was having lunch, at some point I was by myself, and every morsel of food that went into my mouth, I was deeply appreciative of it. And that what a course that every item in the food has gone through to arrive at my table and in my system. And I was overwhelmed with a sense of gratitude for it. And then do what you can. Make sure you exercise, make sure you have a healthy diet, relax, and make sure you get enough sleep. That's all that you can do. Now, what is it in your system that looks at the positives and what is it that looks at the negatives? We all have two wonderful instruments in us, and these two are the mind, the irrational aspect in us, the clouded aspect, the realm of feelings, emotions, loves and hates, impulses. Modern medicine calls it the limbic system. The intellect is the rational aspect of our brain, which is the seat of logic, reason, analysis. And it's interesting that a survey conducted in the United States said that 90% of the top performers in business and at their jobs use the intellect. And on an average, they earn about $30,000 more per year than their counterparts who function on the mind. So, this is something that you need to take into account. Because when the Bhagavad Gita talks about it, you disregard it. But when the Americans say it, then you take notice of it. The other day, someone asked me, why do you give examples from foreign American and European examples when there are Indian examples to be given? Because you are not impressed with Indian examples. If I talk about Steve Jobs coming to an ashram in India, then you wake up. But if I were to talk about so many people in India going to an ashram, you're not concerned. So, the mind imagines things. You imagine a friend to be an enemy. You imagine a brother to be working against you. You see all sorts of things in your imagination. It's the intellect that has the capacity to see reality. The mind tricks you. A person you don't like, you believe the worst of that person. Even when the person does things in actually, factually proves that he's doing things for you, for your benefit, you refuse to believe it. It is the intellect that has the capacity to guide you. The mind distracts you. The mind is not capable of concentration. That is why the mind is likened to a monkey. A monkey and the mind share two characteristics. One, asthira. It's constantly flitting from place to place, never remains at one place. And two, even at a given place, it oscillates, it's restless. But this mind, if trained properly by the intellect and becomes single-pointed, it gains power. This is the example of Hanuman. Hanuman is deliberately portrayed as a monkey because of the parallel with the mind. That Hanuman, the moment he set eyes on Lord Ram, became single-pointed. And look at the power that he got. Not only the power that he got, and he played a stellar role in the war with Ravana, but nowadays, people worship Hanuman. You recite the Hanuman Chalisa, never mind Ram. This mind all of us have. But all of us have the intellect with which to train the mind, to guide the mind, to keep the mind in focus and gain the power of the mind. So the intellect has the capacity to keep focus. The mind misleads you. It's the intellect that leads you properly. The mind is led by instant pleasure. Anything that gives you pleasure here and now, the mind reaches out for. It is the intellect that has the capacity to look at deferred gratification. When it is the birthday of a 3-year-old child, your friend's child or grandchild, and you want to give a gift to the child, and you go for the child's birthday party and tell the child, I've got a gift for you, but you have to choose because you want to make things a little interesting for the child. And you tell the child, I have 2 things for you. You have to choose one of the 2. And you have packed a box full of the most attractive chocolates, and the child can see the chocolates, beautifully gift wrapped in one hand. And in the other, you have a check for $1 million. And you offer both to the child. The child looks at the check, no reaction. looks at the chocolate, her eyes light up, and the child is reaching out for the chocolate. The child's mother is standing behind you saying, "Arey, not that, go for this, go for this." Child looks at the mother, looks at the check, not interested, grabs the chocolate. Why does the child take the chocolate? If I were to offer you that choice, however much you like the chocolate, you wouldn't even look at them. You would go straight for the check. What's the difference? There are two main differences. One, the child is ignorant of the value of the $1 million, whereas you know the value. And second, the child reaches out for instant pleasure. So even if there were an older child who understands the value of a check, but he can't eat the check, so he goes for the chocolate. And all of us are behaving like kids. We are led by the mind and we go reaching out for instant pleasure. With every passing generation, it's becoming worse and worse. Now you may say, so what if I pick instant pleasure? The problem is, in life has been designed such that anything that gives you instant pleasure gives you pain in the end. You cannot escape that. And that which is really good for you, that gives you happiness in the long run, is unpleasant in the beginning. Take examples. Junk food. No child needs to be educated on the thrill of junk food. But you keep eating junk food, you'll become a bundle of junk. Healthy food. Offer vegetables to a child and say, yuck. But cultivate the taste for healthy food and you have a lifetime of health and happiness. Same thing with exercise. Nobody likes exercising. But if you exercise, you have a healthy body, a healthy mind, and you can enjoy the good things of life and achieve your objective in life. So, this is the mind and intellect. This is the first lesson that Vedanta teaches, and perhaps the last lesson we learn in life. We live on instinct, impulse, likes and dislikes, feelings, and led by instant pleasure. Now, there are 7 stages of life. One is a couch potato. You sleep through life, sleepwalk through life. You're half awake, half alert, nothing really matters to you, and you just exist. Then the next is a materialist. Recently, someone told me what a materialist is. He says a materialism is buying things you don't need with money that is not yours because you use a credit card or you take a loan to impress people who are not worth impressing. And in the end, you get nothing from it. So, materialist is one who just focuses on earning money and that's it. He doesn't even enjoy it. Next comes a sensualist, a party animal, who all that he wants to do, he or she, is to enjoy life. Eat, sleep, drink, so on and so forth. Then there are the power-hungry people, political guys who just want power. You want to be chairman of a company because it gives you power. You want to be chief minister of a state because it gives you power. Then comes the sentimental variety, to whom just emotion, they live in the world of emotions. Then there are the cerebral, intellectual, who live in the world of ideas and ideologies. And the last is the spiritual. So let's briefly take a look at these varieties. couch potato is one who is not aware of even his own deeper aspirations. In the end, you can't sleep through life. And the aspirations deep down, your ambitions, your desires, at some point in time surface and bother you. You have to wake up to the beauty and magnificence in the world. And such a person changes, at least for a person that he or she loves. It could be a son, it could be the country, it could be anything. A materialist is what he is because he's ignorant of the higher. All that matters to him are stock options, fees, bonus, salary, profit, so on and so forth. But in the Rig Veda it is said, money is like manure. You hoard it in one place and it pollutes the air. There's a stench. Spread it over fields and it rewards you with a rich harvest. So, what you must do is learn the art of giving. Because the truth is, the more you give, the more you gain. The way to gain is by giving. You don't even have to give anything. Think of giving. And you benefit. That moment you are enriched. Think of grabbing. That moment you are impoverished. So, in the book and in the movie called Ultimate Gift, the grandson of a billionaire who was utterly selfish, never thought of anyone other than himself. At one point in time, his mind stretches to accommodate the well-being of a little girl who's suffering from cancer. And that moment, he gets the entire inheritance, billions of dollars from his grandfather. You might think this is just a story, but put it in practice and see for yourself how it pays rich dividend. Then comes the sensualist. Sense enjoyment is the lowest in both quality and quantity. You can enjoy a sense object only when there is contact between the sense object and your sense organ. Like when you eat delicious food, you can enjoy it only when the food is in contact with your taste buds. Once you swallow it, it's gone. The deadly thing about sense enjoyment is it has diminishing returns. Every successive contact reduces the joy content in it until when you indulge indiscriminately in it, the joy comes to zero. This is called neutralization. When you have it, it doesn't give you pleasure. But when you're denied it, it gives you displeasure. Therefore, you have to work hard to maintain all the things that you have around you. And the worst part is, it doesn't multiply when shared. So, you need to look at your own higher aspirations, higher entities within you, which give you much more joy, both qualitatively and quantitatively. Take a look at the power-hungry people. Power is the most flimsy and fragile thing. You have it one day, it's gone the next. It's dependent on other people's whims and fancies. See, one person says, you're a nice person, and the word spreads, you become popular, you gain power. By the same token, just one person says something nasty about you, and before you know it, you've gone. There's a saying in English, uneasy lies the head that wears the crown. Real power comes from unselfishness. You want to be an MP, you want to gain power, the only way is to serve people, serve your constituency, give, serve, add value to others. You will gain power, whether you like it or not, whether you want it or not. So shift your mindset to service. And the word that is used in the Bhagavad Gita is Loka Sangraha, work for the well-being of the world. What a wonderful concept. It doesn't say only for Indians. It doesn't say only for Hindus. It says the whole world. India, in its long, unbroken history, conquered the world not with military aggression or economic bullying, but with just the power of love, the message of higher values, and its spiritual content. Then comes sentimentality. You rise above the physical, but when you're attached to someone, you become subservient to the person. Even a king like King Dasharatha became subservient because of his attachment to his son Ram. So there was a demon who came and bullied him, threatened him, and said, if you don't give me what I'm asking for, I will kidnap your son Ram. And Dasharatha was almost going to give in to that demand until Ram came to know about it. And all he did was send a message to this demon saying, if you don't get out of this kingdom in the next 2 hours, I will break every bone in your body. And that demon fled from there. So what is the difference? Dasharatha was attached. Ram wasn't. When you are attached, you're at the mercy of those who use their intellect because you are functioning on the mind. And the law is, attach, you suffer. Attach, you lose. So when you're attached, the interaction itself becomes painful. And in the end, you lose the person. It creates conflict. Attachment is selfishness. So the Bhagavad Gita is not asking you to physically detach yourself from your family members or loved ones. The Bhagavad Gita simply says, continue the relationship, continue the love, drop the selfishness. So detachment is what you consider as love minus selfishness. How do you get detached? Get attached to the higher. You know, Wordsworth has written a beautiful poem, a longish poem called Laodamia, in which the backdrop of that poem is this couple, young couple, Protesilaus, the great Greek hero, and his young, beautiful wife, Laodamia. The Greeks and the Romans would always be at war with each other. So one time the Greeks were attacking the Romans, and there was a prophecy that the first Greek who lands on Roman soil would be killed. So the Greeks are debating whom to send first. And Protesilaus decides to take his ship first. And he lands there, he fights valiantly. But as the prophecy says, he dies. His wife Laodamia, young, was heartbroken and prays to God, you've got to give my husband back to me. And God sees her sincerity and agrees to give him back, but only for 3 hours. And that too is not for real, naturally. He's just a ghost. He's been sent there to counsel her. So this is the difference. Laodamia is attached, miserable. Protesilaus loves her dearly, but is detached. And she asks him, why did you have to go first? Did you not think of me? And he answers, on thee too fondly did my memory hang, and on the joys we shared in mortal life. Our new planned cities, our unfinished towers, so on and so forth. But lofty thought in act embodied brought about my deliverance. This is it, the lofty thought. Every one of us must think of the higher. And he continues and says, love was given, sanctioned, encouraged, chiefly for that end, that self might be annulled. How many of us are using our relationships, our love, for self-annulment? We are using that selfishness all the time and then getting into trouble. Now let's take a look at the cerebral people, scientists, authors, economists, who live in a world of ideas. They are less dependent than the sentimental people, more in command of the world around them, but intolerant of lesser mortals and arrogant. Such people need to think of who has created this magnificent universe, who gave me the capacity to think, who has given me the talent in the field of science or literature or poetry or whatever it is, or music. And when you think beyond, when you stretch to the transcendental and use your subtle intellect, then things start unfolding before you. This intellect that is designed to be sharp, penetrating, and take you beyond this mirage of the world to the reality that lies behind, beyond, has become dull now because of the overwhelming influence of desire, emotion, and the mind. Spiritual people also have their limitations because they are attached to my religion, my faith, my guru, and some of the worst battles have been fought in the name of religion. Such people focus only on mastery over the scriptures, but they are with the letter. They don't go beyond to the spirit. And they look down on other faiths and say, oh, you will go to hell. Only I will go to hell. They need to cultivate universal values. They need to look beyond the letter and capture the spirit. And what is this spirit? Adi Shankaracharya says beautifully, Nitya Anitya Viveka Vicharam. Constant reflection on the distinction between the Nitya, permanent aspect of life, and the Anitya Vastu, which is the world and all that the world has to offer. And it has nothing to do with your mastery over the scriptures or your wardrobe or your activities. There were two friends, school friends, who met after many years and on the street one day. And they started talking, chatting. They were so happy to meet each other. And then they asked each other, so where are you going? So one guy said very self-righteously, I'm going to the temple. Every evening I go to the temple after my job is over. And the other friend very sheepishly said, I'm going to have a good time. Every evening I go to the club, I go to a lounge bar, I go to a party, and only then I go home once I've had a good time. So they went. And then after some period of time, it so happened that both died at the same time. Now what happened was, the guy who was going partying to the club and parties and lounge bars went to heaven. And the fellow who was going to the temple every day was sent to hell. So the guy who was sent to hell protested. He told, at the gates of hell, he said, this is unfair. I went to the temple every evening and I've been sent here. And look at that friend of mine, every day he was having a good time and he didn't enter the temple. He was sent to heaven. This is not fair. So the guy at the gates of hell told him, says, Beta, you went to the temple, yes, physically you were in the temple, but your mind was in all the lounge bars and clubs. You were thinking, look at this friend of mine, he's having such a good time. Whereas your friend, physically he was at parties and the clubs and so on and so forth. But every evening, very sincerely he thought, Arey, look at my friend, he's such a good man. Every evening he's going to the temple. So that guy thought of God, he went to heaven. You thought of clubs and lounge bars, you are here in hell. So being spiritual is not about what you do physically. It's about what's going on in your mind. What thoughts are you entertaining? So Vedanta, the Bhagavad Gita, inspires you with a higher ideal. It saturates you with love. and satisfies you with knowledge. The result of that is you will achieve outstanding success. You will be tremendously happy within, and you will get to the state of perfection. This brings us to the end of this session. For those of you who are inspired and want to continue with this, we have pen drives on the Bhagavad Gita that are available, and we also have Bhagavad Gita webinars every Saturday evening for free. You may want to join, and I'm sure you will get intimation of this in your chat program or elsewhere. Thank you very much, Dia, and I hand it over back to Dia for the next part of the session.
Thank you so much, Jayaji. You've made the Bhagavad Gita even more beautiful if that's possible. And you made it so relatable to all our lives, truly. Especially now, I think, when we're all in the midst of this, I think the greatest crisis that we are going to see in our generation. I want to tell my viewers that Jayaji's Vedanta Trust is committed to spreading the simple values of Vedanta to people of any denomination and economic background. The activities conducted through the trust include Bhagavad Gita weekly webinars across the world. I saw someone asking on the chat if you have your weekly classes on, so they can join that. There are also value education programs for teens, social responsibility programs for underprivileged children, food rations for underprivileged families post the lockdown, programs for young professionals on the pathway to excellence, and publication of books for adults and children. So viewers, your support to their trust would greatly be appreciated and very helpful. The Vedanta Trust bank details will be put in the chat box for your use. I would now like to request Ms. Sumita Roy, our Vice President, to join us.
Namaskar.
Namaskar.
Thank you, Jayaji, for spending this evening with Ladies Study Group. Thank you for your time and sharing with us your vast knowledge of Vedanta and insight on how to lead a more meaningful life and spiritual life. And we thank our members, guests, and the media for support. See you all again soon in our next webinar. Now, Dia will conclude.
Thank you, Sumita Di, and thank you once again, Jayaji.
My pleasure.
I was just saying that, when I took over as president of Ladies Study Group in the middle of this lockdown, I had promised my members that I'm going to do my best to make these hard times into the greatest ones and to help everyone embrace this new normal. And I think today you have shown us the path to do just that. So thank you so much for that. And we hope to have you in Kolkata with us when things are better.
Thank you.
We want to wish you and all our viewers who have joined us today, stay safe, stay positive, stay hopeful, and see you soon on our next webinar together. Thank you once again, Jayaji.
Thank you, and all the best.
Thank you so much.